I don't usually do this, but thought it might help a little bit somebody out there, maybe if I broke down some of the aspects, some of the qualities of spiritual freedom, liberation, awakening, whatever you want to call it. My way of speaking usually tends to be quite conversational, a little bit ragged, a little bit, moving around, which lends itself to, when I'm out walking and talking. But, sometimes we need something a little more direct. I don't like to do that in many ways because I don't want... My dog is trying to be sick. Stop it, please. Because it kind of speaks to the left brain a little too much, because there are so many ambiguities, there are so many nuances, there's so much grace involved in awakening, in softening, that if we get too mindy about it, the mind tends to hijack it, like the mind tends to hijack everything. So I don't like to speak to the rational approach too much. However, on this occasion I will. So what I've got is five qualities of spiritual freedom. A journey to inner peace. I think that's what it says on the thumbnail. So what I've got, these are the 5 qualities that I'm just going to spend a little bit of time exploring. 1, radical acceptance. 2, surrender. 3, inner stillness. 4, openness. 5, fearlessness. Acceptance, surrender, stillness, openness, and fearlessness. In so many ways, there are so many more qualities, if you like, to this spiritual freedom, what we might call spiritual freedom, which I just call naturalness in a way. But to have a conversation, we have to start somewhere, and what better to start at this kind of thing. So let's go through these a little bit. Radical acceptance. What does it mean? The ability to meet life as it is, without resistance or judgment. Freedom arises when we embrace the full spectrum of our human experience, including pain, wounds, and darkness, as part of the divine unfolding. So if you've been to any of my other videos, you'll know that I speak of accepting, of meeting and loving what arises. So if we just kind of think about what it is, and we're not talking about the outside world, let's just talk about the inside world. Focus all effort on the inside world. Bring attention to what is being resisted. Where's the fight? There's usually a fight going on, an inner fight on the spiritual journey. I don't like this. I don't want that. I'm fighting with this. This hurts too much. I'm scared of the body. This emotion is too hot. I'm too afraid of things. This is all the refusal to accept what is actually arising. And if you think about that from a logical standpoint, what arises, it's here in this moment, not in the future and not in the past. It's actually here in this moment. And yet here we are fighting with it, which takes a lot of energy and which takes a lot of, everything gets focused on that. And so we end up corralled, funneled into the refusal to accept what is actually happening. And so this points to a presence, really. Presence is acceptance. Yeah, the deeper we go into presence, the more we accept. And the more we accept, the deeper we go into presence. And of course, all of these qualities and all of these openings have consequences because they bring stuff up to the surface. But the whole point of the spiritual journey, the journey to a kind of spiritual freedom, which is just freedom, really, freedom of remembering true nature, is that everything arises for us to love it. Everything comes up and arises for us to love it. If you want to know God, welcome everything. It's back to that kind of that quality, that idea. And whatever we can't accept, there's the inquiry. There's the inquiry for the spiritual seeker. What is it about it that I can't accept, and why? So I can't accept it, whatever. I can't accept it because it hurts too much. I can't accept it because it shouldn't have happened. I can't accept it because it's just too much. I can't accept it because it makes me too angry. I just can't accept it. There's your doorway. There's a profound doorway into an opening to see if it's possible, even in this moment, just for one moment, just for this moment, to radically accept it. And the more we can open and the more we can accept, the deeper it goes and the more radical it starts to become. So we stop all this kind of fighting with our experience, and by we turn ourselves to the world, because the world is a catalyst for our acceptance or our denial or our refusal to accept. It doesn't turn us into soft, weak human beings who just allow anything to happen. That's a misnomer and a misunderstanding about the spiritual path. It actually makes us stronger, clearer, wiser, and more capable of taking clear and honest and deep and true action in the world. But it comes from a deep place. It doesn't come from the divided place. So there's a few words on radical acceptance. Surrender. Letting go of the ego's need to control or fix. True freedom is found in the courage to relinquish the struggle and allow life to move through us, trusting the deeper intelligence of being. To get it clear, surrender is not something that the self does. No one's asking you to surrender to the enemy. No one's asking you to surrender and lie down and become a victim. But the ego mind will tell us such a thing. Because the ego's strategy for survival, the survival mechanism that goes on, is built around control. Control of the environment, control of the emotions, and ultimately control of the world. That's what we see writ large in the world. It's control. Yeah? And so it's like you ask the ego mind, well, how do you feel about surrender? It's just not going to work. It's not going to have any traction. It's not that. It's from a much deeper place. It's, do we have the capacity to fall deeper into ourselves, into awareness, into oceanic awareness, yeah, the ocean of being, and to surrender the very mechanism that keeps the whole self alive and existent, the agitated, the fighting, the one who carves up the world into the good bit and the bad bit according to me, because I'm so righteous and I'm so knowledgeable and I'm so clever and I see things so clearly that I know what's right and wrong and right and wrong. But most of that and a lot of that comes from the wounds. Yeah, so we're dividing the world up according to our wounds so often. Yeah, and this is not to deny anything that people feel about the world. This is not, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a deeper element of surrender here. To surrender the aggressor, to surrender the righteous one, to surrender the one who says, I know, endlessly I know. Because that's often coming from a defense and attack posture. And that's not it. So is it possible to surrender that one and to fall deeper into a kind of like this, the unknownness, to fall into the unknown and to live much more from an unknown, to willingly let go of knowing. Because ultimately, most of what we think we know, we don't actually know to be true. It's a belief. It's an idea. It's a thought. Can we let go of thought? And then, by and by, thought becomes useful, not destructive. Thought serves awareness instead of dominating awareness. Thought becomes a grand servant, because thought and mind are beautiful things. They're creative things. Nobody wants to get rid of that, but it has to fall in line and stop, running the show, stop driving the car, unless we want it to drive the car. Mind at the moment, for most people, just drives whether we want it to drive or not. It's careering down the road of life. Surrender. There are so many nuances to surrender, and it's really a good quality to, this is a really good quality to use as an inquiry. Can I surrender? Am I willing to surrender the mind? The emotional mind, or the mind that's fixated on, again, same thing, on control, on dividing the world up, dividing the world of my experience up. Is it possible for me to surrender that very mind and to fall into something less known, to actually soften up so much that surrender happens? Surrender is a great softening. The mind can't do it, and the mind won't do it. Make no mistake. If you're looking to the mind for the answer about surrender, it's never going to happen. So the mind would rather keep you on the course, on the road, on the path of life forever, rather than allow surrender to happen. It can't. It's not possible. You might try, but so use that key, that quality, to dive in deeper and deeper and to contemplate on ever deeper levels what surrender means to you, and whether it's something that you want to explore on a deeper and deeper and deeper level, because it takes you somewhere. It takes you into, who knows. It's different for each person. Everybody is different. It could be acceptance takes you somewhere. It could be that the doorway of surrender takes you into a fearful place, because you're so used to being in control that there's something comes up, deep things come up, deep wounds, deep issues come up when you entertain and find yourself willing to surrender the one who thinks that they have to be a certain way to live in this world. Surrender that one. That's surrender. Number 3 we're going to go to is inner stillness. Freedom is not in external circumstances, but in discovering the unchanging silence at the core of our being. This stillness becomes the backdrop of all experience, offering peace amidst the turbulence of life. I've talked a lot about silence and stillness in some of my videos, and it's almost like integral to find a way of becoming more and more and more still and silent within experience. And I can honestly say that, I would say maybe 10, 20 years ago and beyond, I would not have a clue what I was talking about here, because I was living in agitated mind, agitated emotions, agitated body. And really, I can honestly sympathize with people who have become agitated and don't know what it is to be still. I think personally, that there's more opportunity, because there are more videos, there are more teachers, there is more a spiritual field of energy nowadays. But there's also more distraction, and there's more, drama in the world and in personal lives and in society. And it is really hard to find stillness. But friend, I would encourage you to explore what that means for yourself. And if that means, you have to clear the way in order to find a moment of stillness, then do it. If you need to meditate a lot, then meditate. But you're not meditating. You're only trying to meditate to find stillness, not to find answers. Answers might come from stillness, because a lot is revealed in deeper and deeper levels of stillness and silence. A lot is revealed about us, about the world. Our intuition comes alive. Our insight, our awareness, our ability to see clearly comes through falling into this inner stillness. But it does seem to take a journey, and that might mean attending to the body armoring. It might mean attending to the subtle energy body. It might mean attending to, whatever lurks in the emotional body, if you like. And there's usually some shallow breathing, or there's stuff stuck up here or in the heart is obviously, a great area for trouble and tightness and constriction. And of course the mind is a chatty thing, chatty little organ, whatever it is. And the mind will endlessly talk. It's going to endlessly chat and keep on the narrative, because we've got thousands and thousands of hours of tape loops running in our mind and in our brain, that we fixate on. We've attached to it. Consciousness, us, as the ocean of being, have attached to the mind's chatter, the endless mind's talk. And so it never stops. And so we just listen to it. It's like a pop song playing over and over and over and over in your head, except that's your thought, and it's going on and on and on. So even when you sit down to say, I'm going to find some inner stillness, there it is. There's the noise, the agitation, the noise. It goes on and it goes on. You have to go through that. It doesn't just stop. You go through it. It's on that level. You're going here. Not up there. Don't go up there. Go down here, go below the waves of thought, go below the waves of emotion, go below the waves even of body, go below the waves of form, go below and below and below until there's just this. It's beautiful. There's a moment of stillness, and it doesn't have to be quiet anywhere. It helps to get a taste of it, so that you can become familiar with what stillness really is. Because then you find then you have a reference point, and you know the stillness, so you can carry that stillness into all experience. This is a practice. It can be called a meditation practice, but it's just a practice of life. And you take it with you. You take stillness wherever you go, because you don't need to find it there, and you don't need to find it there. It's like this. Presence and stillness and silence and openness are all the same quality. Like a zero, like a nothing, like this. And from there, everything comes. From there, everything arises. Absolutely beautiful. And it informs you, brings peace to the body, it brings peace to the cellular being, it brings peace to the emotions, it brings peace to the mind. And it's like a resting place for the whole organism. Inner stillness becomes, as I said, it becomes the backdrop of all life. It's not forced. It's not, you don't have to grab hold of it. It's natural. It's like falling into the naturalness, our naturalness. The stillness is our naturalness. Number 4, we're getting through them. Hang with me. Openness, a willingness to remain undefended vulnerable and fully open to what life presents. This openness dissolves the boundaries of separation and reveals the unity of all existence. That is probably one of the biggest triggers and one of the biggest questions and one of the biggest blocks that we get working with people in the spiritual environment, because we have built ourselves on defendedness, like this. We have built ourselves on building up a self. It doesn't matter what self. It can be a victim self or an aggressor self or a right self or a wrong self or a weak self or a strong self or a strong ego or a weak ego. It doesn't matter. It still has the same quality of defendedness. A refusal to be vulnerable, and there's no way it would fully open to what life presents. This is so important, because the journey of awakening, let's say, as it falls deeper and deeper and deeper into the human experience, into this very experience that we're having, necessitates that we open, that things open, that there is an opening. I don't want to fixate too much on the heart, but the heart is included. But everything starts to open because everything is closed down about us. All our chakras are closed down in some way, or tight, or constricted, because that's how we've come to live in the world. That's how we're trained to live in the world. And you can understand it because the self, as it rises up, is predicated on building a solid structure for itself. You become who you are, you become whatever your name is, and then you've experienced, when you were a baby, vulnerability and openness. And then conditioning, parental, ancestral, societal, moral, religious happens. And then gradually there's a kind of innate learning that we have to close down. And that's right. That's a right thing to do. Of course it is, because we're building a self. The self is being psychologically built. So there's a boundary we build, and part of that boundary is protecting innocence and vulnerability, and part of it is just the way of becoming a self in the world, and that self is built on all of those structures, and it's very necessary, and it does, to a certain extent, it really does a good job. But then we're trapped. And then we're trapped, and then we have to live life, apparently, according to all of those defended principles, those defended qualities that we've carried around. And that's the self right there. Come onto the spiritual journey, and where we're talking about openness and undefendedness. And it's like, what the fuck is that? That sounds dangerous. Why would I do that? Why would I open up when I've learned to navigate the world through defendedness, through closing down that vulnerability? I must protect my vulnerability because it's a dangerous world out there. And so there we are, kind of trapped between the desire for freedom and a desire for openness and a desire to live in this kind of expanded, more open, kinder way, but we're trapped by the very fear of vulnerability itself, which has to be kind of explored and embraced, or at least inquired into on the spiritual journey. And that, again, like all of these, like acceptance, surrender, and not so much stillness in a way, but certainly acceptance and surrender, it has a consequence. Because when you're willing to open, to even consider and to start to open, then everywhere on all the history of your defendedness and closure, on all the beliefs that you've built up, consequent and subsequent to that, come rushing up to the surface to say, me too. I want openness. I want to come to the light. I've been locked up here. Your vulnerability is actually one of your gifts. Vulnerability remembered is a gift. Vulnerability remembered is innocence. Innocence is true nature. Make no mistake. That's how powerful vulnerability is. But we have to go through the fear that the fear of what letting down our guard is going to mean. Again, self can't do it. The built-up self cannot do that. It won't do that. Has no interest in doing that. It's not going to do that. So something else has to happen. And when I mean something else has to happen, it's like we have to see from the eyes of awareness much more, and be much more willing to let go of the one who feels that they need to, navigate the world from such a defended position. Nothing is ever really lost. Everything is always discovered. Yeah, so you don't turn into an acquiescent blob or a weak person in the world. In fact, you find more authority. You find more right action. You find more of your true yes and your true no. Because they're coming from a deeper place. Because when there's openness, there's nothing to defend anymore. It's like the openness of discovering true nature. You discover you are love itself. What's to defend? You discover you are consciousness itself. What's to defend? You discover you are the light, you are God, a manifestation of God. What's to defend? And that doesn't mean that nothing happens. It means right action happens. That's how powerful openness is. But it's a journey. It's a willingness and a journey. And it does involve surrender, and it does involve radical acceptance. And that's how powerful it really is. And I would say, explore your defenses with such a willingness, with such an intimacy, with such a willingness to be intimate with what it is that seems to need to be defended so much, that you would, give everything, that you will never move from this place. There are people who don't move, on the spiritual journey, even with great willingness and, to do whatever it takes. Get stuck in an unwillingness to let go. Because letting go creates such a vulnerability. I know this one myself. I know all of these myself. I was extremely vulnerable during my 20s and 30s because of stuff that had happened to me. But God, I wouldn't accept it. And God, I didn't even know it was there. I buried it and buried it and buried it the same way I buried all of my innocence and tenderness and truthfulness and my rage and my anger, grief and all of those. I buried them all under a I will survive in the world. And I didn't turn into a horrible person, but I did turn into a drunken, crazy person. By and by, on this journey, 20 years, 25 years later, here I am, and there's an openness, and I feel open. But I don't, and the vulnerability, that's what I was talking about. The vulnerability, stopped being so raw and actually started being utterly natural and great, in fact. I wouldn't trade this vulnerability. It stops being called vulnerability. The word vulnerability triggers something in the mind, that says, "Ooh, that sounds dangerous." But vulnerability becomes naturalness. It just becomes a natural openness. Everybody has this capacity. That's a great inquiry. That's number 4. Finally, number 5, fearlessness. Spiritual freedom involves meeting the inner darkness, our fears, traumas and shadows with awareness and love. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear, but the capacity to walk through it into the light of truth. Courage, my friend, is is meeting fear with a smile. Meeting fear without needing it to go away, without needing to change anything. Fear arises. Courage is the soft capacity to meet whatever fear is covering up or whatever fear is bringing to the table, and to say yes. Fearlessness is yes. Welcome. You don't have to love it. You don't have to hate it. You don't have to see it in any way. You kind of move into the relationship with it. I would say that fearlessness is intimacy. Fearlessness is dissolving the idea that I have to, fear is here and I've got to move away from it and I've got to keep it somehow under control. Fearlessness is a kind of bravery of the heart that is prepared to meet life, even if it feels painful, even if it feels tender, even if it feels like it might kill us psychologically, existentially, emotionally. Fear is an emotion. I'm not talking about we need to get clear about fear. There's fear, because fear is a big thing. If I don't know, crazy guy or an axeman or something, or murderer or something comes to the door, there's going to be a certain fear. I just accept that as being a sort of primal, sort of response. There's a primal response, but the primal response has been expanded or hijacked into fear of emotions, fear of exposure, by the self. The self has claimed fear for its own and then walks around the world often, for so many people, kind of ruling their life. And then you come onto the spiritual path and we're invited to let go of that fear. Because you can't take fear into the true spiritual journey. You have to leave it behind at a certain point. But that doesn't mean kind of pushing it away. It just means kind of coming up to it. And as Chogyam Trungpa would say, tickling it, or allowing it to tickle you. It's like being soft with it. I mean, this softness, which is what Amodhama and I talk about so often on this spiritual path, is the capacity to be soft. The soft touch with our experience. And so when fear comes up, fear is very hot and it's a very dynamic thing. Certainly can't say on many levels that fear is soft, but we have the capacity to be soft with our fear. And that's what's being asked. In fact, all of these qualities, I would say, encourage us to become softer and softer and softer. Because so often we're built up, we believe ourselves to be the boundary of the body. We believe ourselves to be the boundary of mind and emotion, and everything's kind of fixed. So we tend to live unconsciously, we don't even notice, in very hard, fixed, clipped ways. The self is very contained and everything's like that. But actually, we have the capacity to soften all of this up, to soften ourselves up, to be softer with our experience. By and by, the softness that we might have with even our own fear tends to dissolve it a little bit. We stop trying to get rid of everything we don't like. By and by, we move through the world whether we like it or we don't like it. We're not dictated to by our own likes and dislikes and preferences and not preferences and beliefs and not beliefs and all of this kind of stuff. We tend to move through life with more of a kind of fluid, like a river almost, and far from that turning us into you know, kind of weak, soft, spiritual sort of people. It actually turns us into warriors. Warriors of openness, warriors of presence, warriors of fearlessness, warriors of surrender, warriors of acceptance. This becomes a beautiful journey, the tenderization of us. We become tender and true and genuine, honest human beings. And it seems to me that a lot of people want that these days in this phony, self-fixated world that we've, you know, that's running insane in the world. So that's my 5 qualities. I haven't got anything more to say from that. I really hope these have entertained you and given you some, you know, some ideas of where the inquiry might be for you, if indeed there is an inquiry. Maybe it's just been entertaining. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up, throw me a comment, subscribe to my channel if you feel like doing so. I will see you again. Many blessings. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.